The hook, the laugh that shouldn't exist, the sound, was faint at first. A childish giggle, wet, stuttering, almost choking, echoing across a field of rotting carnival posters. It was recorded on a wax cylinder in 1876. No one knows who pressed record. No one knows who the child was. But every historian agrees on one thing. There should have been no one alive within a mile of the abandoned circus camp that night. As the crackling giggle distorts into something older, hungrier, the recording cuts abruptly. What comes next is a whispered phrase, an adult voice trembling with terror. They woke up again. The makeup isn't paint. This is where our story begins. In rural Morrow Creek, Pennsylvania, the traveling troupe known as the Victorian Clowns arrived with bright wagons, delicate porcelain masks, and a reputation for refined, aristocratic comedy. They weren't the loud, boisterous circus clowns Americans were used to. These performers were silent, pale, elegant, more like puppets than people, with movements too fluid to be entirely natural. Locals welcomed them, children followed them, churches tolerated them, but something was wrong from the first night. Families reported missing pets. The church orphanage claimed one child woke up screaming about the tall white man under his bed. Farmers discovered strange footprints, long, delicate, almost dainty, circling their barns, and yet the clowns smiled, bowed, and performed as if nothing was amiss. History insists they were only entertainers. Newspapers from 1876 describe them as eccentric artisans, but a suppressed series of federal documents unsealed in 1949 tells a different story. A story of identity stripped away, of faces stolen, and of a troupe that was not made of people, but something else wearing their skins. The town with a vanished history. To understand what happened in Morrow Creek, we must first understand what isn't there anymore. Most towns from the 1870s left behind photographs, church logs, school registries, land deeds. Morrow Creek left behind almost nothing. Its official census disappears in 1877. Its local newspapers never survived. Its church, St. Bertram's, burned in a fire with no recorded cause. Even the cemetery has been paved over by the state highway, marked only as old ground #12. What few archives remain came from the Morrow Creek Orphan Asylum, a grim, brick complex on the hill overlooking the town. The asylum kept meticulous notes, required by Pennsylvania law, but in 1949, when researchers opened the asylum vault, they found something strange. Entire years were ripped out. Sections cut by a blade, clean, precise, intentional. Only fragments survived. One dated June 1876, written by matron Ellen Wick, reads, "The children whisper about the clowns every night. They claim the performers change their faces at will. I dismissed it as fantasy until I heard the laughter from the hallway. No child was awake." Another entry, found 3 beds empty, sheets immaculate, no signs of exit. And the most damning, the troupe visited again. They offered a private show for the boys. I refused. They stared at me without blinking. I believe they know something I don't. These pages were meant to be hidden forever. They describe something more insidious than murder, a method of infiltration, a way to enter a community by taking what society ignores: the orphaned, the lonely, the unseen. As if the clowns weren't just performing for the children, but selecting them. The clowns who never removed their faces, unlike other traveling performers of the era. The Victorian clowns never removed their masks. Not once, not in public, not backstage, not even when lodging with families. Mrs. Joanna Strickland, one of the few adults who recorded testimony before disappearing, wrote, "They arrived at dusk, 6 of them, faces white as porcelain, lips crimson like dried blood. Laughter was silent, like they were gasping for breath. Their masks weren't painted with cheerful expressions. Instead, they bore soft, expressionless smiles, almost angelic yet somehow wrong. The eyes were the true horror. Deep hollows, glass, like, reflective, but the townspeople, desperate for entertainment and novelty, accepted them. Witnesses reported strange behaviors. The clowns never ate while people watched. They slept sitting upright, perfectly still. Their joints seemed to bend too easily. Their footsteps made no sound on wooden floors. Children claimed the clowns' shadows didn't match their bodies. One farmer swore he saw a clown standing in the rain for 7 hours straight, head tilted slightly, mask gleaming under lightning. When confronted, the performers bowed politely, hands shaking in a slow, ritualistic manner. They never defended themselves, never spoke, never broke character. The troupe leader was only referred to as Mr. Gallo, a tall rail, thin figure with elongated fingers and a mask that appeared cracked, though some argued the crack shifted from day to day, like a wound healing and reopening. Some locals suspected they were a family of mute performers. Others thought they were part of a cult. But the children whispered a darker rumor. They aren't wearing masks. They're wearing faces. Their real faces are under the skin. These whispers would soon prove deadly. The first child who went missing on July 3rd, 1876, the town changed forever. 8-year-old Paul Hargrove, known for following the clown's wagon during rehearsals, vanished between sundown and moonrise. He had been sent to fetch water from the well. He never returned. His mother found his bucket overturned, handle bent as if twisted by great force. There were no footprints, no drag marks, only a faint, crimson smear on the stone edge of the well, and something far worse, a painted teardrop. Bright red, dripping slowly, still wet. The clowns denied involvement, shaking their heads silently. But during the search, a deputy entered their wagon and found something chilling, a child-sized chair. Straps and dried flakes of what looked like stage makeup, mixed with something that resembled skin. That evidence, however, never reached the sheriff. The deputy who discovered it disappeared the next morning. Paul's mother claimed she saw a clown outside her window that night, not performing, not smiling, just watching. Head slightly tilted, hand raised in a slow, deliberate wave. She reported it, but the sheriff dismissed her as hysterical. 2 days later, a scream echoed from the riverbank. A fisherman discovered something tangled in the reeds. Paul's clothes, neatly folded, untouched by water. And next to them a mask, white, expressionless, freshly painted red at the lips. The fisherman claimed the mask was warm, almost alive, to the touch. Word spread that the troupe had taken the boy, but the clowns continued to perform nightly, filling their tent with laughter, while a grieving town listened from afar, powerless. And then something even stranger began. People claimed they saw Paul again, standing among the clowns. Face painted white, eyes empty, and smiling, the show that should never have been performed on July 7th, with half the town fearing them. The Victorian clowns announced a final, grand performance. Free to attend, for the healing of hearts, said a flyer mysteriously nailed to the church door. Most families stayed home. But the children went. Dozens poured into the tent, drawn by curiosity, the promise of joy, or something more sinister pulling at their minds. Parents claimed their children insisted they had to go, that the tall clown said it was important. At sundown, the lanterns lit. The show began. The performance was unlike anything documented in American entertainment. It wasn't comedic. It wasn't theatrical. It was ritualistic. The clowns stood in a circle, hands linked, masks gleaming. Their bodies swayed in ways that suggested broken bones, yet they moved without pain. A low humming filled the tent, vibrating the wooden beams. Witnesses described children falling silent as if entranced, a sound like teeth chattering, though none of the performers moved their mouths, the scent of iron, thick and metallic shadows on canvas walls stretching unnaturally long. Then the lights went out. For 11 seconds, the tent was pitch black. People outside heard children whimpering, then laughing, then something like bones cracking. When the lanterns flickered back on, the clowns were gone. All of them vanished, only the children remained, sitting perfectly still in their seats, silent, smiling, heads tilted at the same unnatural angle as the performers. When their parents rushed in, the children said they enjoyed the show, but could not describe it. Some didn't remember entering the tent at all. The next morning, 5 more children were missing, and the tent had collapsed inward as if swallowed from below. The investigation that was doomed from the start. Share if Alastair Boone initiated an investigation. It lasted exactly 9 hours. When Boone and 3 deputies searched the performers' wagons, they found clothing, props, and journals written in an indecipherable language resembling a mix of German, Latin, and children's scribbles. Pages contained handprints, tiny, frail, layered over larger ones. One journal entry depicted a crude drawing of a smiling clown holding a child upside down, their faces touching. The sheriff ordered the troupe arrested, but by noon, Boone had vanished. His horse was found wandering the riverbank. His boots remained in the stirrups. Boone was simply gone. The deputies refused to continue. Families protested. The mayor insisted the performers had rights as traveling entertainers. Underlying this civic paralysis was something darker. The town itself seemed afraid to act, as if collectively controlled by a fear they could not articulate. The asylum matron wrote, "The children will not sleep. They sit upright and watch the walls. Their smiles never leave. They whisper about changing faces and the tall one. My nurses are leaving one by one." Meanwhile, reports emerged outside Morrow Creek. A telegraph operator in a neighboring town claimed a clown stood outside his window for hours without moving. A pastor in a nearby village reported that children during service began humming in unison, a melody he later recognized as part of the troupe's ritual performance. This was no longer an incident, it was a spread. One deputy attempted to burn the wagons. The fire died instantly, as if smothered by an unseen force. By sunset, the Victorian clowns were declared escaped. But the truth is simpler and more horrifying. They never left. They were already inside the town, inside its homes, its children, its institutions, and something was guiding them. The orphan asylum and the echoes in the walls, approximately 300 words. The Morrow Creek Orphan Asylum was built in 1841. A cold, angular structure of red brick and iron bars, meant more for confinement than care. Children called it the House of Hollow Footsteps. After the Victorian clown's arrival, the asylum became the epicenter of strange events. Nurses reported hearing laughter echo through the halls at night, but not childish laughter. The sound was deeper, slower, as if passing through water. Matron Wick, exhausted and terrified, wrote, "The walls hum at night. It is the same melody the clowns hummed before the show. I fear the building itself has become an instrument." Children refused to sleep in their beds. They chose corners, closets, under stairwells, anywhere without windows. One boy clawed his own palms raw, claiming, "The tall clown keeps tapping on the glass." But the asylum had no windows in the children's dormitory. Then came the footsteps. Every night, at precisely 2:13 a.m., footsteps echoed through the west hallway, slow, deliberate, uneven. The asylum doctor insisted it was old pipes. Then a nurse saw it, a figure in the hallway, elongated, masked, head tilted. It took 3 steps, paused, then flattened against the wall, as if its body were made of cloth. When the matron checked the hallway, nothing was there. Only the faint scent of lemon oil and makeup. On July 10th, 3 children disappeared from their locked dormitory. Only their blankets remained, folded into neat, human-like shapes, as if the children had evaporated, leaving only the outline of their bodies. The asylum chapel was found filled with painted smiles, hundreds of them drawn in red on the altar walls. The matron tried to alert the authorities. No one responded. By then, half the town had already heard it, the soft, rhythmic tapping on their windows, the signal the Victorian clowns had chosen their next child. Section 8. The porcelain boxes buried under the town. Approximately 300 words. The breakthrough, or what should have been one, came from an unlikely source. Horace Delvin, the town gravedigger. While expanding the cemetery hillside, he struck something solid beneath the earth, not stone, not metal. Porcelain. He unearthed a small white box, smooth, cold, and sealed without hinges. Buried beside it was another. And another. By the afternoon, he had uncovered 13 porcelain boxes, each identical in size, shape, and immaculate craftsmanship. But the horror lay inside. When the sheriff's remaining deputy pried open the first box, he vomited instantly. Inside was a human face, not a head, not a skull, just a face, like a mask peeled clean from a skull. Eyes empty, lips frozen, skin stretched thin. But these were not adult faces. They were children's faces, each one painted with delicate clown makeup, white powder, red lips, and a perfect, serene smile. Delvin collapsed, shaking violently. The deputy fled and never returned to duty. Worse still, the faces were preserved. Soft, untouched by decay, as if waiting to be worn again. Town records revealed something devastating. The cemetery hillside had been renovated in 1874, 2 years before the clowns arrived. Meaning the porcelain boxes were buried before the troupe set foot in Morrow Creek, which forced one unthinkable conclusion. The Victorian clowns had been here before. Not as performers, not as travelers, but as harvesters. When word spread, families panicked, parents locked their children indoors. Church bells rang at random hours. The mayor declared curfew, but it was too late. That night, Delvin the gravedigger was found dead, hanging from the cemetery gate. His face was missing. In its place was a porcelain mask still wet with paint. Section 9. The town meeting that broke reality. Approximately 300 words. On July 12th, the mayor convened an emergency town meeting in the old courthouse. Over 200 residents attended, packing the wooden benches shoulder to shoulder. A storm raged outside, thunder rolling like cannon fire. The enraged crowd demanded justice, arrests, searches, military intervention. The mayor raised his hands for silence. But before he could speak, the lanterns flickered. The storm went silent. The courthouse wooden doors creaked open on their own. And 6 Victorian clowns walked in, not quickly, not slowly, deliberately. The air grew colder. The room fell silent. Children began to whimper. The tall clown, Mr. Gallo, took center stage and bowed deeply. Then he raised his hands, palms open, as if offering a gift. That's when the laughter began, not from the clowns, from the ceiling, from the walls, from under the floorboards. The laughter grew louder, warped, animalistic, as if dozens of unseen mouths were chuckling in layered echoes. People clamped their hands over their ears. Some collapsed, screaming. The clowns didn't move. The mayor attempted to speak, but his voice broke into a sob. Mr. Gallo stepped forward, leaned close to him, and whispered something unheard by the crowd. The mayor's eyes rolled back. He fell to his knees, trembling violently. Then the lanterns burst into flame, white flame, silent flame, flame that cast no shadows. When they finally extinguished, the clowns were gone, and the mayor was smiling, a wide, painted smile impossible for a human mouth. His lips were bleeding from being stretched beyond their limits. He stood shakily and declared, "The show must go on." Half the town fled that night. The other half stayed. None of them were ever seen again. Section 10. The ritual known as the exchange of faces, approximately 300 words by 1949. Researchers uncovered a forbidden manuscript in the ruins of the asylum. It was handwritten in a mix of English and an archaic dialect believed to be from Eastern European carnival cults. It described a ritual known as the exchange of faces, a practice believed to be centuries older than American settlement. The manuscript explained certain cults believed clowns were not entertainers, but vessels housing wandering spirits. These spirits required new faces to remain in the human world. They targeted children whose innocence made their faces more pliable. The ritual transferred identity. The child became the vessel, and the vessel became whatever was left of the child. The manuscript included horrifying drawings, a child's face being lifted like fabric, a figure wearing the face like a glove, a smiling mask floating above a group of kneeling children, a tall, thin figure clearly meant to be Mr. Gallo holding a bleeding porcelain mask, and most disturbing, a depiction of a town, its church, homes, and orphanage encircled by 6 masked figures, each pulling the faces off children. In the final pages, written in rushed, frantic lines, they are drawn to places of abandonment, to institutions that hide the unwanted. They feed on forgotten children. Historians believe the manuscript was hidden by the matron before her disappearance, but who wrote it? Some theories say an asylum doctor. Others say a surviving child grown but ruined. One chilling footnote reads, "Once they take the face, the child continues, but not as themselves." And below it, "The vessel does not age, the child's face does." This raised a terrifying possibility. The Victorian clowns weren't travelers. They were survivors of previous rituals, wearing stolen faces from generations past. Section 11. The clown who spoke without moving his mouth, approximately 300 words on July 14th, 2 days after the courthouse incident. The last remaining deputy, Jacob Hart, claimed he encountered the Troupe leader near the riverbank. Mr. Gallo stood motionless, mask tilted toward the deputy. Hart raised his rifle, shouting warnings. Gallo didn't react. Then a voice spoke, "Put it down," but the clown's mask never moved, not the lips, not the jaw, nothing. Hart fired in panic. The bullet struck the clown's chest and passed through him, hitting the river water behind. The clown's body folded like cloth, collapsing inward, then expanding again, as if reinflating. The voice spoke once more, "You should not have done that." Hart fled back to town, raving. Residents claim he clawed at his own face for hours, screaming, "They're trying to wear me. Don't let them take it." He was found dead at dawn. His face gone, only a faint white powder remained on his pillow. After Hart's death, the clowns became bolder. They were seen standing in the middle of streets, staring at passing wagons. Children reported seeing masked faces floating outside their second-story windows. One family swore a clown stood in their parlor when they lit a lamp, but vanished the instant they blinked. And the voice, more people heard it, always behind them, always in the dark, never from moving lips. A traveling salesman recorded this testimony before fleeing. "The tall one told me to leave. He said the harvest was nearly complete. But God help me, he didn't speak. The words came from the walls." Researchers now believe this ventriloquism wasn't performance, it was projection. The clowns didn't speak with mouths. They spoke with whatever they had stolen. Section 12. The night of the wax children, approximately 300 words by mid-July. The remaining townspeople were asleep, deprived, paranoid, and desperate. Children whispered in monotone voices. Adults refused to leave their homes. Then came the night history tried to erase. The night of the wax children. It began when lanterns lit spontaneously along Main Street. Every lamp, every window, every porch light. An unnatural glow filled the town. Children began walking toward the orphan asylum in silence, in single file, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. Witnesses described the children's movements as stiff, mechanical, unblinking. Their skin appeared glossy, their joints rigid. Some left trails of waxy residue on the cobblestones. Parents chased after them, screaming their names. But the children did not turn, did not blink, did not breathe. Inside the asylum courtyard, the clowns waited. 6 of them. Mr. Gallo raised his hands, and the children stopped. He then removed something from his chest, a mask. But it wasn't porcelain, it was human skin. He placed it over a child, and the child spoke, "Mother, it's warm." Then the child's body collapsed inward, melting into a wax-like puddle. The face remained intact. Parents tried to intervene, but the other clowns formed a circle, extending impossibly long arms that blocked every path. The ritual continued. One by one, children were fitted with new faces, then reduced to wax. By dawn, 37 children were dead. The clowns disappeared with their harvest. The courtyard was filled with wax puddles, and dozens of masks drying in the morning sun. The town woke to a silence so deep it felt like mourning. Section 13, The Exodus and the Sealed Roads. Approximately 300 words. On July 15th, the surviving adults attempted a mass evacuation. Wagons, horses, carts, an entire town trying to flee at once. But the roads out of Morrow Creek had changed. Bridges that existed the day before were gone, replaced by rotting timber. Forest paths led in circles. A new ravine split Route 8 clean in two, though no earthquake had been reported. One family swore the trees moved while they watched. At the northern exit, a barricade of abandoned clown wagons appeared overnight, though the troupe had supposedly vanished. Their wheels spun without wind. Desperate citizens attempted to burn the wagons again. The fire refused to catch. The remaining children began humming softly, the same tune heard during the final performance. A preacher tried to lead families on foot through the woods. By nightfall, half his group returned, claiming, "We walked for hours but remained in the same place." The preacher never returned at all. The state would later argue the roads were blocked due to flood damage, but photographs from 1876 show clear skies and dry land. One survivor, a woman named Hannah Pierce, wrote, "It wasn't that we couldn't leave, it was that the town wouldn't let us." By July 16th, Morrow Creek was fully isolated. The Victorian clowns had engineered the perfect seal, no one in, no one out, and that night from every home, every attic, every cellar came the same sound, soft knocking. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps again, the signal, the calling, the invitation. Section 14, The Ascension of Mr. Gallo. Approximately 300 words in the final days before the vanishings. Townspeople reported seeing Mr. Gallo everywhere, standing in fields, perched on rooftops, inside abandoned homes, at the edge of the cemetery, watching from the tree line, always still, always smiling. Some said he looked taller each day. Others claimed his mask was fusing with his skin. One boy insisted Gallo had more joints than bones. Researchers theorize Gallo was not the troupe leader, but the ritual's central vessel, a being that required multiple faces to maintain its form. On July 17th, during a violent thunderstorm, everything changed. Lightning struck the asylum tower. For a brief second, the entire building illuminated, and witnesses saw Mr. Gallo standing atop the roof, arms outstretched. The children below raised their heads in unison. Then the sky went silent. The storm froze. Rain stopped midair. Thunder ceased mid-rumble. Time itself seemed to buckle. Gallo's mask began to crack, not with damage, but like an egg hatching. Something underneath pressed outward, Something writhing, shapeless, shifting through stolen faces. A scream echoed across the town, but no one could tell if it came from Gallo or the sky. Then, just as quickly, the moment ended. The storm resumed, wind howled, the asylum doors burst open, and the Victorian clowns marched out with hundreds of faces stitched to their chests like trophies. This was not a performance, this was ascension, and Gallo had become something older than human, older than ritual, older than the idea of faces themselves. Section 15, the last night of Morrow Creek, approximately 300 words, July 18th, was the end. The remaining townspeople barricaded themselves inside the church, the last stronghold not yet touched by the ritual. They locked the doors, boarded the windows, lit every candle. They prayed, not for salvation, for a quick death. Outside, the clowns gathered. Witnesses described over 100 masked figures, some tall, some child-sized, some crawling, circling the church in perfect silence. At midnight, the knocking began. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again. The children inside whimpered. Adults held their mouths shut to keep from screaming. Then the doors opened on their own. The clowns flooded in like a tide of white faces and long limbs. What happened next is only known through a single survivor's journal, written in trembling, uneven handwriting. They didn't kill us. They examined us. He described long fingers lifting faces like cloth, fitting them over clown visages to test compatibility. If a face didn't fit, it was discarded. If it did, the person was left alive, but something inside them changed. Their eyes dulled, their smiles sharpened, they began humming. The survivor wrote, "The ones left alive were not survivors, they were replacements." At dawn, the church was empty. Morrow Creek was silent, not a single intact face remained. Section 16, the government intervention that never happened, approximately 300 words on July 20th. A telegraph operator in a neighboring town reported, "Morrow Creek has gone quiet. No movement for 2 days." A federal investigation began, or so the public was told, but archived documents from 1949 reveal the truth. The federal government never reached Morrow Creek. Every dispatched investigator disappeared before arriving. Their horses returned riderless. Their equipment was found strewn along the road, lanterns still warm, boots still laced. One chilling report reads, "We hear laughter in the trees, turning back." Eventually, the government sealed the area, claiming it was due to environmental contamination. The truth was simpler. They were afraid. Years later, a classified memo stated, "Morrow Creek is a contamination of identity, not of soil, not of water, but of self." Researchers proposed unimaginable theories. The clowns were non-human entities wearing bodies like clothing. The ritual opened a rift that consumed the town. The population became vessels and left. Willingly, Morrow Creek never existed at all, and the records were fabricated by something mimicking human behavior. In 1881, the town was quietly erased from maps. Railroads diverted routes through neighboring counties. Newspapers banned mention of the name. By 1900, no one under 40 had ever heard of Morrow Creek. But the telegraph operator who first reported the silence never forgot. He claimed that on the night of July 19th, he received one final transmission. Tap, 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 6 knocks. The calling, the invitation. Section 17, the discovery of the film reel, 1933, approximately 300 words in 1933. During the demolition of a warehouse in Philadelphia, workers discovered a metal canister hidden behind a false wall. Inside was a film reel labeled MC Final Performance 1876. Authorities assumed it was a historical artifact from an old circus. Archivists restored the film carefully. What they saw should never have been captured in human history. Footage began with a blurry shot of a circus tent interior. Children sat in rows silent, unmoving. Their eyes were wide and glassy. Then the camera panned. The Victorian clowns entered, not walking, sliding, as if pulled by unseen strings. The film showed Mr. Gallo tilting his head too far beyond human limits, a child's face peeling slightly at the chin, a clown's mask twitching as if breathing shadows that didn't match the figures, a child lifting off the ground without moving. Then the audience began to laugh, not joyful laughter, laughter forced through gasping lungs, a sound of pain made to mimic delight. The film ended abruptly with 6 loud knocks recorded on the audio track. Tap, 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 tap. The archivists destroyed the reel, terrified of what they had witnessed. All except one. He kept a copy. 4 months later, he was found dead in his home. His face was gone. And on his wall, painted in white, were the words, "The show continues." Section 18, The Return of the Clowns, 1949, approximately 300 words in 1949. The U.S. government reopened the Morrow Creek archives. Why? Because children in 3 separate states reported seeing white faces in their windows, quiet figures standing at the edge of schoolyards, tall, thin clowns at bus stops, painted smiles on mirrors. That weren't their moments before one child claimed, "They asked to borrow my face." Another whispered, "They said they came back for the rest." Investigators found porcelain fragments near playgrounds, freshly painted, still warm. And then came the disappearances. 4 children in Ohio, 2 in New York, 7 in rural Maryland, all vanished without a trace. In every case, the only evidence left behind was the same, a faint red smile painted on a windowsill. When parents questioned their surviving children, the answers were chilling. "They're rehearsing. They said the show is coming. They said Mr. Gallo misses us." That name, unknown to the children, sparked panic among investigators. They returned to the 1,876 documents. And what they discovered next sealed the archives for decades. A photograph from 1,874, taken in another Pennsylvania town. It showed a group of children posing with performers from a traveling clown troupe. In the center stood a tall, thin clown with elongated fingers and a cracked porcelain face. The caption read, "Mr. Gallo and his Victorian players, the same troupe, the same leader, 2 years before Morrow Creek." And he looked exactly the same, as if he had never aged. Section 19, The Faceless Graves, approximately 300 words in the fall of 1949. Researchers uncovered a forgotten section of the Morrow Creek Cemetery. Under broken earth and dead leaves lay 27 graves, all marked with the same inscription. No face, no name, no rest. Each grave contained a skeleton. But not a single skull had a face. Instead, each skull was smooth, perfectly smooth, as if the bone itself had been erased. The bodies were preserved in unnatural stillness, their arms folded across their chests. In one grave, researchers found a porcelain shard lodged between the ribs. It belonged to a mask painted with a child's smile. DNA testing did not exist in 1949, but handwritten notes indicate the researchers believed these were adults replaced by clown vessels, parents whose children had been harvested, surviving victims of the face exchange ritual, empty shells once worn by something else. One anthropologist wrote, "These were not ordinary deaths. The bones show no signs of violence. It is as if their identities were removed from the bone outward." Another added, "Something took what made them human." At the center of the grave cluster was a larger stone. "Here ends the town, but not the show below." The inscription was a symbol resembling a cracked mask. Days after the discovery, the lead researcher disappeared. His face was never recovered. Section 20, What Still Walks Among U.S. Approximately 300 words today. Morrow Creek is an unmarked forest. No signs, no roads, no buildings, just silence. But hikers report laughter with no source, footprints in muddy trails shaped like pointed shoes, porcelain shards beneath tree roots, masks hanging from branches, a tall white face watching from. Tree-line forensic teams entered in 1972. Only half returned. Their report concluded, area unsafe due to structural instability. A lie. The true report, declassified in 1998, stated, we found faces on the ground, fresh faces. Some of them were still warm. Urban legends claim Mr. Gallo still walks the ruins, searching for replacements. Some say the Victorian clowns never died. They simply moved on to new towns, new children, new harvests. And if you listen closely at 2:13 a.m., the time the footsteps echoed in the asylum, you may hear tapping at your window. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again, the invitation, the calling, the show, because the truth is brutally simple. The Victorian clowns were never performers. They were collectors, and they are still collecting. So if you hear laughter at night, soft, choking, childlike, don't look out the window. And whatever you do, do not open the door.